We're going over System TES, Talmud Sefirot, Part 1, Tzimtzum Restriction, and Kav Linel. Table of questions and answers for topics. And we'll go over again the rules to understand Talmud Sefirot or any other Kabbalah material. The first rule is unnecessary. Is when we're reading the Kabbalah material that it's talking about reality, we make it necessary when we understand it's talking about our perception. Impossible is when we think it's talking about the past, and we make it possible when we understand that it's talking about the future. And then finally, secrets is when we think it's talking about others, and we make it disclosed when we understand it's talking about ourselves. So it's states of perception that we go through in the future, and we apply them on ourselves. Number 55. What terms are absent in the wisdom of Kabbalah? From the beginning to the end of the wisdom, there is not even a single word that relates to any tangible or imaginary term, such as space, time, motion, and so on. Also, there is no absence in spirituality, and any change of form does not mean that the first form is absent. Instead, the first form remains in its place unchanged at all, and the Shinui Tzura, change of form, that has now been acquired is added to the first Tzura form, the beginning of Ohr Light. Number 56.
Wait, Zakai, can you go back to 55 for a minute? There's something about the way that first sentence is written that confuses the hell out of me. From the beginning to the end of the wisdom, there is not even a single word that relates to any tangible or imaginary term. And to me, that seems like, in my brain, I'm understanding this as there's nothing in this that relates to anything in the corporeal or the spiritual, or...
No, the corporeal, the imaginary. So the idea is that the spiritual, you cannot imagine spirituality. So anything you can imagine is not spirituality.
Right.
And anything corporeal is also, of course, not spirituality. And that's part of the problem, that when people read Kabbalah, they start imagining stuff, and the idea is that anything someone's imagining, you know that they're not experiencing spirituality. So like when people have dreams and stuff like that, and they say, oh, a dream of the holy divinity in the dust. It's like, yeah, that's not spirituality.
Well, I knew that it was written correctly. I couldn't make that connection. So thank you.
No problem.
I got it.
You can stop me on anything that you wanted. You want more clarification. I'm just going through these, so stop me when you want to. 56. What is the ordinary language in the wisdom of Kabbalah? This language is language of branches that points to their upper roots. That is, because you haven't even a single blade of grass below that has not a root above. Therefore, the sages of Kabbalah have put together a language that is equipped to imply through the branches and teach of the upper roots. Ohr Light, page 1, and the beginning of Istaklut Inner Reflection, item 1. 57. What separates and discriminates in the wisdom of Kabbalah? The Shinui Tzura, change of form, distinguish and departs the spirituals from one another. Ohr Light, item 30. 58. What is the origin of the will to receive? The will to bestow in the Ohr Upper Light necessitates the existence of the will to receive in the Neetzal Emanatedl. Istaklut Inner Reflection, item 11. 59. What makes the Ohr Light exit the Mercyl Emanator and become a Neetzal Emanated? This renewed Ohr Light left the Mercyl Emanator and became a Neetzal Emanated because of the Tzura form of the will to receive that was renewed with the Ohr Upper Light, since it wants to bestow. Istaklut Inner Reflection, item 11 and item 15. 60. What is the first substance of every Neetzal emanated? The new Tzura form that emerged existence from absence, meaning the will to receive that is in every essence, is the first substance of every Neetzal emanated and every essence. Moreover, everything that exists in the Neetzal emanated, or in the essence that is more than that substance, is regarded as Ohr Light and Shefa abundance that extends from the Ohr Upper Light, existence from existence, and not at all as a Neetzal emanated and a creature. It is not surprising that a Tzura form becomes a substance, because it is so in corporeality as well. Our conduct is to regard the first Tzura form of the essence as the first substance. That is because there is no attainment whatsoever in any matter in the entire reality, since our senses perceive only incidents in the matter, which are forms that incarnate and manifest in the first substance. Histaklut Pnimit, inner reflection, item 35. (61) From which time is it regarded as a Neetzal emanated? It stops being a Mercyl emanator and becomes a Neetzal emanated right at the beginning of the formation of the world received in the Neetzal emanated, called Bechina Aleph, first discernment in the Ratzon, desire. Ohr Pnimi, Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 3. 62. Has a spiritual that accepted a Shinui Tzura change of form, by which a part of it departed and became a different Bechina discernment, lost anything because of that? There is no absence or loss in spirituality. The part that departs because of the Shinui Tzura change of form does not diminish or lessen the Ohr Upper Light in any way. Rather, it is lighting one candle from another. The first is not lessened whatsoever. Thus, any Shinui Tzura change of form is an addition to the first. Histaklut Pnimit, inner reflection, part 2, regarding the Hitkalalut mingling of Sefirot 10 emanations in every Sefirah emanation.
Why the part that departs because of the Shinui Tzura? What stands behind the word departs? What departs?
So the idea is that if you have a certain state, let's say phase 1, there's a part of it that becomes phase 2. Phase 1 still stays.
Right.
So the part that departs because of the change of form within it, that's what makes phase 2. So you still have phase 1 as it was before, and now you've got an additional state on top of it, an additional phase, which is called phase 2.
Isn't that the feeling of self, which at first phase, it's associated only with the first phase, and then it acquires another phase, and from that place, the sense of self departs from the first phase and is now including both the first phase and the second phase?
Yes, but the idea is that the first phase hasn't become lost.
No, it
What
is.
it says basically, the first phase splits into two, and one of them then becomes an additional, the second phase. So you have one, and then the other one that's
right, and your sense of self is expanded.
Okay, it's always expanded. So basically, the first phase that I had in the past, I still have it now.
And you still
I just have additional phases above me. I have to take care of all of them, but they'll always be there.
Right, it's like the desires of food, sex, and family.
They always stay.
So you still have food, and then afterwards you added the state of sex, and then after the state of family, and you have to deal with them. It's not that you only deal with the last one, you deal with all of them.
Yeah. You can't get rid of them.
63. How and in whom are there many forms and changes in the Alamo Worlds? All the changes and the multiplications are carried out only by the impact of the Ohr Light on the Kelim vessels that receive it. However, the Ohr Upper Light, in and of itself, remains in complete rest, meaning unchanged and without any chidush renewal. Ohr Pnimi, Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 1. 64. How are innovation and movement depicted in the Ohr Light? There is no movement, meaning chidush renewal, in the Ohr Upper Light. Instead, the part that the Neetzal emanated receives from the Ohr Upper Light is what becomes innovated and multiplies, like lighting a candle from another without the first lessening, according to the chidush renewals of the forms in the kelim vessels. Each receives according to the degree of its own desire, which changes from one another and hangs down from one another innocently and immeasurably. Ohr Pnimi, Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 1. 65. How are all the opposites and the multitudes of forms that extended from him to the Alamo Worlds contained in a simple unity? See Histaklut Pnimit, Inner Reflection, Item 18 and Item 29. 66. By whom and what is the Kav Linel extended from Ein Sof Boundless? The Masach screen is a detaining force that was placed on Behinot Discernment, fourth discernment, after the Tzimtzum Restriction to prevent her from receiving insides. That is what caused the emergence of the Kav Linel from Ein Sof Boundless, because the Ohr Upper Light is never subject to change and shines after the Tzimtzum Restriction as it did before the Tzimtzum Restriction. However, now the above Masach screen caused the Ohr Upper Light to be received only in the 3 Behinot Discernments of the Ratzon desire, whose measure is very small compared to the reception in Behinot Dalet, fourth discernment in Ein Sof Boundless. For that reason, it is received only a thin Kav line of Ohr Light compared to the measure of the Ohr Light in Ein Sof Boundless. Ohr Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 1.
So I want to understand this. So even though after the restriction, you do receive in the first three phases, A, B, and C, relatively to the abundance, it is considered just a line.
Yes.
The line reflects how small you are receiving
compared to what you could receive, which is what you receive at the end of correction. So you could say it's in comparison to the end of correction.
Okay.
Kai?
Yes.
Can you back up for just a moment to 65, please?
Yes.
When you have something like this, where you say see another, you see item 18 and item 29, I would like, just for me, it would be nice to see those listed underneath there. I mean, yes, I could go back and I could find 18 and 29, but if the description or the explanation for 65 is to see 18 and 29, I'd like to see it listed under 65.
I would agree with you. Basically what is here is basically what Balasalam wrote. So the only thing I actually added in was the translation in the square brackets. But I do agree with you. But the thing is that sometimes it could be long and would sort of, I just wanted to allow us to go over the Q&A of the topics of Balasalam. And it's more to sort of refresh your memory. It's not that you have to actually sort of know all the details of each one.
Right.
And in one hand, it actually makes it good that it's not here, because otherwise we'd never reach all of it in one session. So I wanted to do it all in one session just to like finish it.
Right.
Go over all the material that has to offer.
Briefly.
Right, and I wouldn't say that as you're going through this that we would need to read item 18 and 29 again. It would just be nice to see it listed there, and then I wouldn't, if I went through this again in the future, I wouldn't have to go back and find 18 and 29 to reread it. So just my thoughts.
Maybe I can add it. Maybe I can add it in the actual presentation after the session. So the presentation will have it, but it won't be in the video.
Right. Thank you.
No problem. Or I could have a link to it, so you could find it through the link to the original Kabbalah info.
That would even be.
That would be probably better.
Good. Sure.
67. Has anything changed in Ein Sof Boundless after the Tzimtzum Restriction as well? Although Behinot Discernment, false discernment in Ein Sof Boundless restricted herself, still there is no issue of putting on a Tzura form or taking one off in the absence of the first, as it is in corporeality. Instead, there is an issue of a new Tzura form that is added to the first without the first Tzura form changing at all, as there is not an absence in anything spiritual. Thus, this entire Chidush renewal of the departure of the Ohr Light and the detaining force that was performed in Behinot Discernment, false discernment, to avoid receiving Ohr Light inside her, is regarded as a new and distinguished Alamo world. It is added to Ohr Ein Sof Boundless light, which remained as it was without any change. You should infer from that regarding every Chidush Tzura renewal form in spirituality. Ohr Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 1. 68. When has the Avyut coarseness in Behinot Discernment false discernment become uncovered? When the Kav line that comes from Ein Sof Boundless was detained from shining in Behinot Discernment false discernment by the Masach screen, because she remained without Ohr Light, the Avyut coarseness in her became apparent. Ohr Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 3. 69. What are the 4 Behinot discernments in the will to receive? First, the Ohr Light from the Mercyl Emanator expands as Ohr Chochma, light of wisdom, being the general sustenance that belongs to that Neetzal Emanatedl. Inside it, there is Bechina Aleph, first discernment in the will to receive, called imposhtur Aleph, first expansion, or Bechina Aleph, first discernment. After that, the will to bestow increases in that Ohr Light, which in turn draws Ohr Hassadim, light of mercy, from the Mercyl Emanator. This is called Hitgabut Aleph, first overcoming, or Bechina Bet, second discernment. Afterwards, that Ohr Hassadim, light of mercy, forms a great imposhtur expansion, namely with that Harat Chochma, enlightenment of wisdom. This is called the imposhtur Bet, second expansion, or Bechina Gimel, third discernment. After that, the will to receive that is included in the Ohr Light from imposhtur Aleph, first expansion, intensifies and completes the measure of the will to receive. This is called Hitgabut Bet, second overcoming, or Behinot Discernment, fourth discernment. Or Pnimi ILight, part 1, chapter 1, item 50. Yeah, I'll fix it afterwards.
I have a question.
Yes.
He's talking here only about the evolution of the phases, but it relates to the first and the fourth one as overcoming.
Yes.
First overcoming and second overcoming. Why isn't there 4 overcomings? Like after the first, the second, well, at least 3, not 4. Actually 4, because the first one is from the root, so at least 3.
So the idea is that the overcoming is when there's a change from the person. And an expansion is when the change is from above. So the idea is that when you're born, that's called first expansion, since you had no choice in the matter. When you join a spiritual society, that's considered a first overcoming. You're overcoming the natural inclination for everyone to be in humanity, and you're going to the spiritual society. You made that choice. You could have just stayed in humanity, just like everybody else, but you decided, no, I'm going to overcome my will to receive, and I'm going to will to bestow. So that's overcoming. In phase 3, you had no choice in the matter, since you basically
we're desperate to.
Yeah, you basically realize that without the will to receive is your sustenance, and if you don't allow a bit of it if you don't take care of yourself, let's say, if people don't take care of themselves, they get divorced, they lose their job and stuff like that. They suddenly figure out, either the hard way or the easy way, that, wait a second, I actually need my will to receive. The main thing I want to do is bestow, but I also need a bit of will to receive in the matter. I need to take care of myself. And that is called the second expansion. You had no choice in the matter. Then the fourth phase.
I had no choice because
without it, you would be destroyed. You would be
destroyed. You would decay.
I will be destroyed in corporeality.
Exactly.
Spirituality.
No,
corporeality. If you don't eat, you'll die. If you don't get laid, you'll probably rape. I don't know, whatever happens to people. There are certain desires that you have to take care of. If they don't, they'll haunt you always. So your will to receive, you have to take care of it. You have to be part of it.
And we see people that come to spiritual society, and in the beginning they're like, yeah, it's all about bestowing, not about receiving, and then their relationships decay. They lose their momentum. Not building it, they're just like allowing it to.
So if I'm summarizing it to myself, I'm thinking of it as follows, that the development of the 4 phases is of 2 types. One is mandatory, compulsory, you may say, which you called it an expansion. And the other one is by choice. You want to, fine, you don't want to, that's, it's your choice. And that's the movement from the first to the second phase is upon your choice,
yes,
as well as the move from the third to the fourth.
Yes, where you decide to use only your will to receive. You're like, forget about bestowing. I'm going to receive what I'm going to receive. I'm going to receive the quality of bestowal, but I'm not going to try to do this corporeal bestowing anymore.
Because you understand that you can't.
But this doesn't have anything to do with choice. I mean, it's not real choice.
We're not talking about features. We're talking about.
You do feel that you have the choice.
It's a sensation of choice.
Sensation of choice.
You do feel that you have to make that choice, even though it isn't yours. That's how all reality is.
Exactly.
A man's free choice is only to the extent that he knows who he is, and he always can know more about himself, which means his free choice is limited up to the point that he can expand it, which means you don't have any free choice, you just have more attainment.
Number 70. What are the 4 otiyot letters of Havaya? The Yud of Havaya is the first imposhtur, expansion of the Ohr Light, called Behinot, first discernment. See item 69. The first Hey of Havaya is the first Hitgabut, overcoming, in the Ohr Light, called Behinot, second discernment. The Vav is the second imposhtur, expansion of the Ohr Light, called Behinot, third discernment. And the last Hey of Havaya is the second Hitgabut, overcoming, in the Ohr Light, called Behinot Daled, fourth discernment. In reflection, item 31.
What's the added value of this item? I mean, like, basically, they're just giving names
It's a structure. It's a structure mechanism. It is the name is used afterwards in all different combinations.
So you're just setting a terminology that can be used afterwards in a
yes,
simple manner, rather than saying first phase, second phase, and so forth.
Exactly. It's just giving structure, and there's also using it that, for example, the Yud and the Vav are thin letters. We went over it in the last session. of chapter 9 and 10, where the Yud and the Vav are thin. So they're showing expansion. They're showing that there's not much work from the person. And the Heys are full letters to show that there's work from the person involved. Number 71. What is the upper Rosh head of the Kav line that touches Ein Sof Boundless? See item 49.
The idea of the Ot Hey is Daled L'chubar B'Psik Shleim, which makes it 5.
72. What is the single thought that contains all the forms and the opposites in the entire reality? It is the thought to delight his creatures. Istaklut Pnimit, inner reflection, item 22. 73. Where do the sages of Kabbalah begin to study? The Kabbalah speaks only of the imposhtur, expansion of the Ohr Light from his Atzmut essence. Through in his Atzmut essence, we haven't any word or uttering. Opening the inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 2. '74. What are the two primary rudiments that contain everything? The first rudiment.
What's a rudiment?
What is a rudiment? Anyone know? Is that right?
A precept, a fundamental item.
Fundamental? Okay.
The first rudiment is that the entire reality before us is already set and exists in Ein Sof Boundless in its utter perfection. This is called Ein Sof Boundless light. The second rudiment is the 5 Olamot worlds called Adam Kadmon, primordial man, Atzilut emanation, Bria creation, Tzura formation, Asiya action, which hang down from Malchut Ein Sof Boundless kingdom after the Tzimtzum Restriction. Anything that exists in the second rudiment extends from the first rudiment. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 3, and Istaklut Pnimit, inner reflection, item 5. 75. What is the meaning of he is one and his name one? He indicates the Ohr Light in Ein Sof Boundless. His name implies the will to receive in Ein Sof Boundless, called Malchut Ein Sof Boundless kingdom. One indicates that there is no Shinui Tzura, change of form whatsoever, detected there between the Ohr Light, which is he, and the Kli vessel, which is his name. Rather, it is all Ohr Light. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 30, and Istaklut Pnimit, inner reflection, item 13. '76. What is the name Ein Sof Boundless? Before the Tzimtzum Restriction, the name Ein Sof Boundless implies that there is no sof end or a siyum suffix there whatsoever, since Behinot Discernment too receives the Ohr Light. Thus, in that place, there is no reason to stop the Ohr Light and form a sof end and siyum end. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 20. 77. What extends from the will to receive that is contained in Ein Sof Boundless? The creation of the Alamo Worlds and their entire contents. It restricted itself in Behinot Discernment in order to uncover the Alamo Worlds down to Olam Hazeh, this world, where it is possible to turn the Tzura form of reception into a Tzura form of bestowal. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 90, and Istaklut Pnimit, inner reflection, item 17. 78. What is the reason for the Tzimtzum Restriction of the Ohr Light? Malchut Ein Sof Boundless kingdom regarded the Ishtavut Tzura, change of form, with her maker as embellishment, which could only be achieved by the creation of the Olamot worlds. That is why she restricted herself. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 40, and part 1, chapter 1, item 90.
Embellishment?
Like an addition, like jewelry. It's adornment. But the idea that you don't have to cross the barrier. You cross the barrier because you want to.
Okay.
79. What kind of reception would be regarded as bestowal? Reception only because it gives contentment to the giver. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 90. Number 80. What is the purpose of the Tzimtzum Restriction? To turn the form of reception into the form of bestowal. Ohr Pnimi, inner light, part 1, chapter 1, item 90. 81. Why did the Ohr Light leave the middle point and never returned? See Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 40, and its Pnimi Inner Reflection, Item 22. 82. Why didn't the Tzimtzum Restriction create a Sof end? The Tzimtzum Restriction was not because of the Shinui Tzura change of form that appeared in the root receive that wanted to correct it. It was only because of the embellishment without any necessity and coercion. 83. Why did the Ohr Light depart from all the Behinot Discernments during the Tzimtzum Restriction? Because there is no partial in spirituality. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 70. 84. Why weren't the 4 Behinot Discernments mentioned as 4 degrees, one below the other, during the Tzimtzum Restriction, and before the appearance of the Kav line? Before the Ara enlightenment of the Kav line, Behinat Dalet 4th Discernment did not regard herself as Av coarse and low, see item 83. For that reason, there is no issue of the impact she has on the degrees. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 90. 85. Why did Behinat Dalet 4th Discernment not become Av coarse immediately at the Tzimtzum Restriction of the Ohr Light, and all the 4 Behinot Discernments remain equal? Because the Tzimtzum Restriction did not occur due to a Shinui Tzura change of form. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 90. 86. Which Behinat Discernment remains empty of Ohr Light? Only Behinat Dalet 4th Discernment. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 2, Item 3. 87. When will Behinat Dalet 4th Discernment be filled with Ohr Light? When the vessels of reception acquire the Tzura form of bestow. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 40. Which is basically end of correction. 88. What caused the creation of the Alamo Worlds? The world that is necessarily there had a desire to embellish itself and resemble the Tzura form of the Ohr Light completely, and that became the cause for the creation of the Alamo Worlds. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 90. 89. What is the desired purpose of Torah and good deeds? To make the vessels of reception work in order to bestow. Istiklut Pnimit in reflection, Item 22. 90. What is the power of the disclosure of the holy names? Their power is specifically to turn the Tzura form of reception into bestowal. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 90. Yeah, it should be a full stop, not a question mark.
Yeah.
It's actually from the copy, but yeah, I'll correct it anyway.
I know, it's from the copy and you still need to correct.
91. How do the holy names reveal? By laboring in Torah and good deeds. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 40. 92. What is Gmar Tikhun, the end of correction? The turning of the Tzura form of reception into a Tzura form of bestowal. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 40. 93. What is the Shoresh Root of every corruption? The Shinui Tzura change of form of the will to receive from the Mercyl Emanator. Istiklut Pnimit in reflection, Item 18. 94. Why is it not possible to turn a cleave vessel for reception into a cleave vessel for bestowal, except here in this world and not in the upper worlds? Corruption and correction in the same carrier exist only in this world. Istiklut Pnimit in reflection, Item 20. 95. What are the 2 Behinot Discernments of the Ohr Light? Ohr Chochma, Light of Wisdom, and Ohr Hassadim, Light of Mercy. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 96. What does the imposhtur expansion of the Ohr Light from the Mercyl Emanator contain? The will to bestow and the will to receive. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 97. Which Ohr Light appears with the intensification of the will to bestow? Ohr Hassadim, Light of Mercy. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 98. Which 2 Ohr Lights are contained in every Neetzal Emanatedl? Ohr Chochma, Light of Wisdom, and Ohr Hassadim, Light of Mercy. Ohr Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 99. Why is Ohr Hassadim, Light of Mercy, inferior to Ohr Chochma, Light of Wisdom? Because it is extended by the intensification of the return desire of the Neetzal Emanatedl. or Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 100. When is the Kli vessel for reception completed? When Bchina Dalet, fourth discernment of the Ratzon, desire, appears, which the great will to receive. Or Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 101. What is the difference between one who receives within and one who receives without, as in Ein Sof Boundless? The one who receives within can only hold within a limited amount of Ohr Light because of the limitation of the Kli vessel. When receiving without, the Kli vessel does not limit the Ohr Light and that it holds, and it is without kitzbah, allowance. Or Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 50. 102. What are Sefirot Gulim, circle emanations? When there is no differentiation of above and below among the four Behinot Discernments in the Ratzon desire, they are regarded as four igulim, circles one within the other, like onion skins. Or Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 100.
Why would there be no differentiation between the four Behinot? When is the situation where there's no differentiation?
The idea is that these circles represent where there's not enough, there's no coarseness with the screen. So compared to the coarseness with the screen, which is the line, they're considered as if there's no differentiation between them. It's like looking, if you're looking in Earth, you see loads of changes. But when you're looking outside of Earth, it looks like there's no changes, no differentiation. Even though there are. But from the perspective that you're looking at, which is a high perspective, it looks that there's no differences.
If you're looking at Earth from the moon, you just see a blue ball. But when you go in, you see people and stuff.
Exactly.
The more closer you are to detail, the more movements.
And I'm going to hear that on the recording. But if there's no differentiation in the four Behinot, why is there a need even to draw them or talk about them in terms of igulim, rather give them a generic name like a circle?
Think of it like this. The idea is that... Sorry, we can't hear you there.
Differentiation is the individual perception. That's what we're trying to do.
The idea is that if you're in any of the four phases before the barrier, you don't have spirituality. So that it's compared that there's no differentiation there. Even though you could say, well, in phase 2 I have this, and phase 1 I have that. But compared to spirituality, they're all equal.
Because they're still under the will to receive.
Yes. There's no growth there. There's no change of light. In all the situations before the barrier, you're only dealing with maximum the light of relaxation, which is called nefesh. The line, you've got differentiation in the degree you're on. You can sometimes feel relaxation, which is nefesh, modulation, which is ruach, protection, which is neshama, and so on. So there's a differentiation there. There's a change. But in the four circles, even though there are differences in the phases, but from the light's perspective, you're only receiving the same light. 103. Why are the degrees in Igulim circles not regarded as being one below the other before the appearance of the Kav line? Because the Tzimtzum Restriction did not occur because of the inferiority of the Tzura change of form, or Pnimi Inner Light, Part 1, Chapter 1, Item 100. So the idea is that when the restriction happened, there was no, you weren't saying, I'm going to allow the light into the first three Behinot, the first three phases, not the fourth phase. You're just saying everybody out. So everybody out is saying that there's no differentiation between them. 104. Is there evil in the world received by the nature of its creation? There is no wanting in it by the nature of creation, nor would it appear in it had it not been restricted. Is the Kluk limit in reflection, Item 19. When does this all end? 105. What does indirect hamshacha, attraction, from the Mercyl Emanator mean? See the Kluk limit in reflection, Item 19. And we are done. How did you all survive?
Barely.
Can you go back to 94 for just a moment, Zakai, please?
Yes, definitely.
Mark, you're lucky. That's the only one you didn't understand?
Well, I memorized all the rest of them, Yossi. So 94 was the only one I missed.
I'm going to call you after the session to explain
Is
to me
it not
everything.
possible to turn?
Yes.
Why is it not possible?
it says, the description here says, corruption and correction in the same carrier exist only in this world. Only in this world meaning corporeality, or only in this world meaning what?
So let me just get the item and then I can actually look at it. Just
nice question. Good question. I think what they mean is actually in the corporality, before the barrier.
Right.
So we're talking about inner reflection items.
Because you can't really reach the stole before the barrier because you're still under the will to receive. So you can't turn your vessel of reception to bestow. That only happens after the barrier. So they mean while you're under the will to receive, which means in the corporal world. That's my analysis. We'll see what Zakai says. I think he's going to say the same thing.
Okay. Your accent is absolutely mesmerizing. I love it. Thank you.
It changes. So be aware. It jumps between South African, Manchester, and American.
So I can read. I'll translate what Rabash wrote about this item. Okay. He said, explanation, there cannot be in holiness a shell, because if the degree only wants to bestow, then it can't be that it wants to receive. And that means that a degree that wants to receive cannot want to bestow. And therefore, holiness and the shell are two things that are opposite each other. But in this world, there's the ability for a person to have two opposites within him, from the reason that in this world, there's the issue of time. And therefore, there is a time of corruption, and there's a time of correction, a time of tumah.
Tumah is
impurity.
Impurity. A time of impurity and a time of purity. A time of good and a time of bad. This means that there's the ability for two opposites to be one after each other. But in the spiritual worlds, there is no idea of time. And therefore, you cannot say that there's this issue of corruption and correction. Did that help?
Just did the bird song, turn, turn, turn.
That's exactly what I thought too, Jeffrey. Yes, that helps a lot, and I think it is corporeality. I think your brother was absolutely right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's what the book of Ecclesiastes says.
You need to post that song in the SC1 chat now, Jeffrey, please.
Okay.
So we've basically gone over now the entire part one, from beginning to end, in these last 24 sessions. We've gone from chapter 1, chapter 2, inner reflection, the Q&A of the words, and now we went over the Q&A of the topics. How do you summarize this half year?
Well, for me, beyond my wildest imaginations or desires, I never saw this coming. And it's been a great trip along the way because like Mark was saying, as we went along, our understanding increased greatly. At first, I was completely bewildered, like down in the woods on a dark and cloudy day. But my understanding has increased a lot. So it's just been very worthwhile. Thank you. Good choice to do this.
And I'm awestruck by all of this. I still feel like a neophyte or an acolyte, and somehow I stumbled into, or I snuck into the master's room and opened this great book of knowledge and attainment, and I don't deserve it, but it's readily available now, and I'm privy to it. And I'm, like I said, I'm amazed, I'm in awe, and this stuff's incredible. That's all I can say. I'm spellbound.
I agree. It's been unlocked, and it's accessible now to go back and go into it through these.
I find the approach refreshing and insightful. It has changed my perception of what it was saying, how it works, and how it involves each of us. It's the explanations of the revealing of how things are concealed and revealed is just, understanding that and then taking it and applying it to the different articles and stuff is, what really opens things up and gives you insight. So it's quite amazing. Thank you.
I think like this has definitely been the journey. I think you'd probably agree with me. There were parts that, for example, like, you know, the Q&As that we went over quickly just to like finish it, you could say. But I remember in chapter 1, chapter 2, and in reflection, we went much more deeper, especially in chapter 2 when we sort of added more diagrams and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not about the knowledge. So it doesn't really matter if you know it or not. What matters is if you advance through it. So you could have someone who knows the entire part 1 from beginning to end. You can say to them, what's on page 22? And they'll be like, oh, it's this word. It's like, wow, you seem to know a lot about it. That doesn't mean anything because they haven't actually advanced through it. So the idea is that it's not about the knowledge. And some people have told me like, oh, it's very, the problem with these sessions is that they're full of knowledge. But it's not about the knowledge. It's about advancing through them. And that's why we tried to bring them as much as we could to how a person goes through them and not what happened. As we said, we don't care about what happened in the past. We care about states we go on in the future.
Yeah, and that was very helpful, having the 3 rules at the beginning of each session there. Because that helped me, you know, here I am. You know, made all the difference in the world for me.
I also like the growth that you've all gone through in these sessions. I think we started in October. We're finishing now in April. And I think I've seen a lot of you gone through the phases and advanced in the phases themselves. And I'm sure that the way you perceived it before we started and now is probably totally different.
Yeah, it's amazing that from scratch we've created something of great substance here. They say these 24 videos.
And these were definitely a collaboration between everyone in the group.
Exactly.
I could have made the content, you know, of course I took all the source material from the Kabbalah info website. I added the translations and added the diagrams and stuff, but the diagrams especially were definitely based on responses from you. I remember that in chapter 1 it was a little hard, and then in chapter 2 I added more diagrams in. It really helped, and definitely all the Q&As and all the things that we talked about really improved these sessions accordingly.
Can Mark read Mary's summary?
Certainly, I'll read Mary's summary. Mary wrote for us the summary, and she said this is difficult, but the process of the revelation of the Creator within. It's about the process of understanding our individual qualities in the structure of the development, expansion, and raising of our consciousness, and understanding the phases we go through, and the importance of the environment we adhere to throughout our advancement. Mary, you are truly a sage, my dear woman. Thank you. That's well said.
Great summary, Mary. Right, I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.
I'll be in the blue